Welcome, Raymond. Thank you for being here. This is so exciting that you're here during the infancy of this podcast. I'm excited to hear about your sobriety journey that has taken you 4 decades. That's amazing. 40 years without alcohol. I'm sure there's a big story to tell us how that all began. First, I'd like to wish you a happy belated birthday from last Wednesday. And that you're here, 75 years old. Congratulations. And also for spending more of your life sober than you spent drinking is a huge testament of self-love and growth and transformation. So I'm going to get you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then we'll get into the juicy bits of sobriety.
Hi, everybody, and all you friends of Bill W. out there. Hi. I'm a universal channel, and I'm still taking notes on trying to figure out what that is exactly. But apparently, I get messages from the outside. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm open to this thing. I've had an interesting life, and I'm very willing. It's a big part of my life to help people out. Since I don't have the information myself, getting it from a universal place has been a big aid. As a matter of fact, it's the only reason that I'm here at all. Everything started for me because of the program. So many years into sobriety, I got my first couple sponsees. And I found that I really did like helping people out. I was scared to death, but I had a great sponsor. And he told me, people ask you to, if they see something in you, they're going to ask you to work with them. I said, okay. He even got me a woman to sponsor, and he said, she's an alcoholic first, so you got to do it. And then you lead her towards a woman. I said, all right, but I just loved talking to people. It's probably the first time in my life that I didn't do anything so that somebody would love me. And we'll get into that a little bit later on because I got an interesting story. It crosses a long period of time. And so, the program made me, it changed my focus into what I wanted to do. And eventually I ended up sponsoring over the course of years, probably close to 100 people, give or take. And I really did love it. I recognized that I kept getting these messages that I should be doing more and I should be branching out and helping other people. I became a hypnotherapist for a while. And that was fun and really good. And I actually got pretty good at it. I would work in conjunction with hospitals, helping people pre and post-op, so helping them, hypnotize them so that they didn't have to have anesthetic or maybe a smaller amount. I felt like I was really of service with that. It was very nice. But once again, the universal channel thing kicks in and says, this was not enough. Something else had to be done. I had an office at the time and a shingle up that said hypnotherapist. Eventually, I started doing a lot more talking to people than hypnotizing them. I got to a point where all I did was talk to them. And I found that people would talk about my voice being hypnotic. I found that if I could relax them, I was sort of hypnotizing them whether they knew it or not. I would connect with them that way. And it was closer to what my apparent purpose was going to be. And I'm a very, very patient person. It's strange for alkies and druggies and all that, but I'm extremely patient with people. I started to recognize that everybody that came to me wanting to know how to fix what they did. They wanted to know, how do we get over things? How do we forget things? How do we forgive each other? And all this kind of stuff. I was like, how come nobody's asking me how not to do it? Which again was something that came to me in the program. It was nice not to drink. Absolutely. Wonderful not to drink. But then what are you going to do with the rest? Are you going to take steps to live now that you have a grip on this, now that you know what to do, now that you have people surrounding you? How are you going to live your life? A lot of the times we drank because we were scared to step out or take chances or be close to somebody. But once we got sober, we could go, okay, now what? Am I just going to sit here and be sober, or are we going to move on a little bit? I recognized that it was happening across the board with people in relationships. Okay, so we're learning how to say we're sorry. how come we're not learning to not do it to begin with? How come it's okay to hurt each other and then come back and say, listen, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. It'll never happen again. And then it happens again. So, there was a whole bunch to that led me to partnership. And so I'm not sure what kind of people you have watching this. I suspect it's going to be anybody and everybody. And that's good, because this message I have now about partnership is that we're at a time where relationships don't work anymore, especially for women. Women are put in a place inside a relationship of being a woman, being a wife, and acting as such. And then the guys are still trying to become men, and they're in a terrible spot too, because men initially were supposed to go out and work, kill something, bring it back, and then sit around and look at the kids or whatever they were supposed to do. Those stereotypes are not working because men can't do what they were told they were supposed to do. Men can't fix everything anymore. They need women to be there. But if you hurt somebody, if you push them away, if you don't see them as equals, then you can't expect a whole lot from them. So the idea about partnerships started to come in, and it started to be very clear and very important. Also, because of the way that I see things, and I get visions and I get voices and all that kind of crazy stuff. And that could be from the 60s, who knows? But anyway, I recognized that what we needed to do was establish something that had a quality to it. And that partnership was that. And the vision that I got from this whole thing, and that now I'm very clear about when I'm working or writing about it, is that partnership way up here. It's like way up there someplace. And then me and you are partners, and we're looking down and we're making sure that everybody's comfortable. Honey, you need anything you drink? How you feeling today? Everything good? What do we need to deal with? And the idea about partnership is that two people are partners. They may have a relationship, and two people are partners and they have jobs or they have kids, but they're partners first. And that puts partnership in a really interesting spot, because as partners, we get to decide and prioritize anything that we want to do. We talk to each other because it's very important to talk to your partner to find out what your partner needs, how they're doing, what we're going to do right now. Is it a trigger for you? In the past, has it brought up an insecurity or a fear? And then we can talk about those kinds of things, because in a partnership, I'm not talking to you to try and get my point across. I'm sitting there listening to my partner and finding out what she needs. I need to listen to her. Okay, you wanted to talk to me. I'm ready to listen. Go ahead. Tell me what's going on. And it's very important for the success of the partnership. And if you're going to take the partnership and move it towards a relationship, then it's very important for you guys to know that in order for this to work, I need to be in a position where I'm listening to my partner. I'm trying to give her what she needs, making her feel like an equal, all these kinds of things. And I'm doing all these kinds of stuff because I want a happy and good partnership.
So when you say that, was that something that came to you and then you started to create that within your own life? And that's how it evolved into helping others in that space?
Almost all of it was because I was working with clients and stuff. I never read any of this, and I never talked to anybody about the whole partnership deal. Every bit of this has come to me as a result of channeling, as a result of necessity. People would say stuff and I would say stuff back to them, and I would go, wow, that was really cool. But I would have no idea why it was happening. And I would come home. I've been with my honey now for 29 years. And I'd come home and I'd go, what do you think of this? And we would talk about that kind of stuff. And ultimately try to apply it to ourselves. A few months ago, we were sitting on a sofa and watching some television, and I looked at her and went, I can't believe that I could look at you after 29 years and think, I love her more. I care about her more.
Your relationship improved, so it gets better and better as opposed to devolving. It's evolving and growing and deepening,
Yeah.
right? So, honey, 11 years into your sobriety, but can you take us back to when you first got sober? Was there a moment and a pivotal epiphany? Was there handcuffs involved? There's so many levels of rock bottom, and there's so many different ways that somebody comes to that space deciding that they're going to be sober. So can you take us back to the moment you got sober and a little bit of that background?
Oh, okay. So I think that we need to start off with the background part of it. I thought, the first thing I'm going to tell you is that my very first intervention came a couple minutes after I was born. And the doctor said, "This kid's drunk." I mean, I don't remember exactly what he said, but I was born drunk. My mother was a lesbian and she had been raped by several guys and she hated me. And she told me that hadn't drawn a sober breath the entire pregnancy. She would get drunk in the morning and punch herself in the stomach and try to kill me. She would run around the house screaming, "I hate you." An awful lot of that did have an effect on me. I told her, "Well, you did do some damage here because the back of my head is like totally flat." And so there's something that happened out of that. But anyway, I got born drunk, and I'm lucky that we hadn't invented fetal alcohol syndrome because I missed it somehow. I was probably drunk while all that happened, so I don't know. I went into show business at 9 years old. I was the youngest person ever to sing for the Lyric Opera Company. I did La Boheme at 9 years old. I did Lohengrin for a subsidiary of the Metropolitan Opera Company when I was 11. I studied with the Philadelphia Ballet Company. I did a lot of touring and all this stuff. All this time, I had been adopted and I didn't understand it because I was a little kid and stuff. But really, I just wanted somebody to love me. I wanted to be home. And if I had my druthers, nobody ever asked if I wanted to be in show business or sing or anything like that. So when I would come,
Did you derive pleasure and joy out of that? Or was it
well,
for
yeah,
adoration?
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And I certainly got kudos for it. And people knew who I was at that time. I got kicked off an amateur show one time because I was being paid. So I had all that going for me. I enjoyed it. But the thing that tells me that I really didn't care about it is because at no point did I apply myself at all. I didn't want to be a better singer. I didn't want to do bigger shows. I didn't want any of that kind of stuff. I think in retrospect, my attitude was, okay, if I sing, will you keep me?
And did you feel like a commodity then? If you hadn't applied yourself and you didn't have aspirations for growth there at
Yeah.
that age, if you're feel defined by that, did you feel like a commodity? Were you
Well,
making money at that point? Like you said, you were getting paid. So were
yeah.
your parents getting paid for that? So it was almost like your way of paying rent within that family?
Well, I never thought about it that way. My mother, I think it was another rejection, is what I felt. I was adopted, and these people were very nice. Polish family. My mother was a very nice woman, and my dad was a nice, quiet guy. They were pretty loving and did everything with me that they could. But right around the time the adoption was complete, my mother developed diabetes and got sick over the years and had to have insulin. Then she went blind. I took that as another rejection. I didn't understand that this was about her, so I made it all about me. Here was another thing of telling me that we put you in a taxi cab, you go to New York with an agent and a manager, and you're eating in restaurants, and where's your family? Sometimes I felt like I spent more time with an agent than I did at home. And then when I was at home, they took care of her, which I understand right now. Maybe they tried to take care of me, but I didn't feel it. I was already shut down. I'm from Camden, New Jersey. It was a very tough town. I started sniffing glue at about 11-ish in that area. I was sniffing glue, and then we started doing cough syrup and codeine and this type of thing. And then Quaaludes came in. And so all this happened. I'm one of the people that can attest to the fact that heroin leads to pot. And that was disappointing the day that happened. My friend Carl Sinelli, who I could say his name because he was dead and nobody gives a shit anyway. We waited for him. He was coming into Camden from Philadelphia, and he was bringing marijuana. We were all excited, smoked it, and went. This was terrible, just a big nothing. So anyway, that was an interesting time. I left home. Actually, I don't know if I left home as much as I just didn't return at some point around 16 or 17. It was in the 60s. There was a lot of LSD going on at the time. It was beginning at that time. I was doing LSD 25, looking for God, looking for a savior, trying to find something. I didn't find anything. Then all the partying started, and I stopped doing acid after they started adding strychnine to it. But there was always drugs throughout my whole life until like I ended up getting sober. There was always drugs and always alcohol and lots of it,
Would it be, it sounds like there was more drugs than alcohol. Would that be right? Or did alcohol come in later because you didn't have access to it originally and that you could get drugs more easily? Drugs were just more of your thing than alcohol.
Well, it depends. When I ended up in a road band, a couple different bands and stuff, you were on the road and you drank all day long. I thought, you know, something, I'm not really going to do anything heavy until we got on stage. So I would drink all day. And then at nighttime, I would take a hit of something or switch to a heavier alcohol because we were already on stage and everything was fine. My thinking throughout my life has always been screwed up, but my thinking was also never tempered by somebody that had any intelligence that could tell me anything. So, you know, you make up the way that you live.
And if you've got a little gang of friends and a band that are possibly on that very same trajectory, you don't have anybody, your brain at that age without substances, without interventions that are going to alter your state. Young
Yeah.
minds, brains aren't functionable to make all those decisions. So if you don't have that direction, you can hardly expect that together you guys will find that, right?
I was always a little off kilter in a way. I was in Buffalo, New York, and I was on stage in this tiny little bar. We always played bigger venues. And this little bar, I was like right on the edge of falling into the audience. I was singing. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up in the hospital and the doctors are looking at me. I was probably about 18. I went on the road. I wasn't supposed to be on the road. I had a fake ID that said I was 18, but I was right in that area. The doctor, they were looking at me and stuff, and I was like, what the hell's going on here? Had no idea. I had passed out on stage. And he told me that, he said, you had a heart attack.
Oh,
He,
wow.
he said, you had a heart attack. He goes, you should not have survived it. When you're as old as you are, the arteries aren't built up around your heart and it should have killed you. He says, we don't know, no idea. How much drugs do you do? We found a lot of drugs and I was in shock. You know, I was like, what do you mean a lot of drugs? This was my mentality back then. I took the normal amount of drugs. I don't know what he was talking about. You wake up in the morning, you take a couple, you smoke a joint, and you drink a little bit of scotch or some wine. Doesn't everybody?
Your reality was, like I'd said, what you're surrounded by is that. So what would your normal be? You don't even have a
Yeah.
reference point or a metric to measure that.
Yeah. And I didn't see other people either. I was so self absorbed, self obsessed. I really did believe that everybody was doing what I was doing. Several people years afterwards said, hey, we weren't doing what you were doing.
So you're in the hospital at 18 years old and you still have how many years of that level of consumption ahead of you? At 18, you feel infallible and you feel I can do
Yeah.
whatever I want. But you got sober at 35, so you still have half your life left of your drinking and your drugs. So that
Yeah.
wasn't a rock bottom, but that's obviously going to take us there.
Oh, yeah. You know, I toured for a little while longer and then I started getting upset with the whole music industry. It was fun, but I don't know. Somebody else asked me. I ended up in San Diego working at the Lyceum Theater, which brought me back to my childhood. I worked there for a while and ended up entangled in a connection with a director who was drugging young people. Somebody drugged this guy in La Jolla and they killed him. And so
Well,
the whole thing.
he was drugging them and abusing them, or?
Yeah. Yeah, he was drugging young men and abusing them. This one guy, he did it in La Jolla, and the guy ended up killing him, strangling him. So I left, and I was the kind of person that, because I was so close to him at that time, I was a stage manager, and I knew that he was messing. I knew that he was going out with young guys, but I didn't know the extent of it and stuff. But they got me out of town, and so I moved from San Diego to Hollywood and started working. I found that if I said I could do something, I could do it. So I got into a position where I was working for a guy named Hugh Holland, and we were doing antique restoration. And I loved doing that. That was a lot of fun. Generally speaking, it was always a situation of, can you do this? And I say, yeah, sure, I can do it. And they go, okay. So they would let me do it. And then I found out that I could do it. I did all this kind of stuff. And when I look at it now, it had an awful lot to do with being taken care of universally. The universe was always behind me, always handing me stuff to keep me going.
And through those years too, were you still drinking and taking drugs? Because if you're
I know.
still going like that, you've already had a heart attack at 18 when you're in Hollywood working and doing the antiques. So what age are we at now? Creeping towards the 30s?
Probably late 20s, 30s, in that area. I don't recall. I have a lot of issues with the timing thing. If it's any indication, I had a cat. I lived on Melrose, right down the street from the Improv. And every day I would take liquid lunch at the Improv and walk down with my cat Bullwinkle, big Siamese, and we'd walk into the Improv, and Eddie, the bartender, would have my scotch sitting there waiting for me and a bowl of milk for Bullwinkle. Was I a regular? Yeah, I guess so. I really don't recall what happened and what the transition to Coke was. Another situation where I got hooked up with people who were dealing a lot of cocaine, and they were freebasing and this type of thing. I was always that person that they drew into the fold that say, yeah, I bring Ray, yeah, all this kind of stuff. I never paid for anything. I was always like that. I ended up living with this girl, Vicky, who was a big dealer at the time. She was out in Brentwood and Hollywood. We smoked a boatload of coke. One day I walked in, I was having seizures, and I walked into a plate glass window at a supermarket in Brentwood. I walked into this window where I was having a seizure and fell into it. I don't recall, but the whole window shattered. It didn't fall apart, but it's just like, that kind of thing. And nothing happened to me. Their attention was on me, and I was fine. And I went back there, and she said, I had a seizure, fell down a set of steps. I was just in bad shape, but I was still able to have a conversation. I was still functioning. Anything that needed to be done, I could handle it. I could deliver stuff. I wasn't a dealer, but I could do all this kind of stuff. And I seemed to somewhat have my shit together. And when she asked me to leave, I was homeless. I was on the streets in Hollywood. And somebody came up to me. I was trying to get some money, trying to get some food, and slowly, day by day, really losing my mind. It's like all the glue that I had used to keep me together, keep me functioning, was starting to unravel. And I got to a place where somebody said, if you go down here, they'll give you coffee and cookies. So I went there for coffee and cookies, and I didn't leave. I was AA. And so that was, I spent some time there. Give you an idea about my first commitment with AA. Give you some idea about how where my mind was at. I had a wonderful sponsor. After 30 days of sobriety, I tried to think about what did I know about alcoholism. I knew that in my infinite wisdom, if you got 30 days sober, you must really be an alcoholic. So my thinking was that's how screwed up it was. What do you do when you find out you're an alcoholic? You get a sponsor. So how do you get a sponsor? You find somebody who has something that you want. So this guy, Bob, he was riding down the street on his motorcycle, and I went, well, I want that bike. I didn't understand the depth of what they were saying. So I asked him to sponsor me. He took me out for pizza. We sat down, and he said, why did you ask me? He said, Why did you choose me? We've never even talked before. And I said, well, I told him, you're supposed to ask somebody to sponsor you that has something that you want. I wanted your motorcycle. And he said, oh, you realize you don't get it right away, right? And I went, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Of course, he's got to get another bike. Yeah, okay, that made sense. I waited. About 3 years later, I had the bike.
Wow. So in that time when you first went to AA and then you meet Bob, are you still homeless at this point, or have you found through your contacts just a place to crash or a place to live? And then
Uh,
once you're sober, can you find work? What did that look like in those early days?
some of it is a complete blank. I remember going to meetings at the log cabin down there. So much of it is, but I was definitely taken care of. I did have people that come and say, well, you could stay at my place for a while, or gave me work and different kinds of work. And I was always good with my hands. I could build just about anything. I had made a friend of mine that they were built set builders. And so I ended up with a job building sets and working in Hollywood. I started making some decent money there, and it was a perfect place for me. I moved from there to Mar Vista. And I think that the change that happened to me was I lived with a guy in Mar Vista who was one of the people involved in CA building. He was one of the people that started the program. And I didn't understand it. I was a little upset about it. It's like, well, what the hell? AA is not good enough for you and all this kind of stuff. But I sort of kept it to myself. I didn't argue with
What is
anybody.
it? The CA you said?
Yeah, Cocaine Anonymous.
Oh, okay. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, so there's Cocaine Anonymous, there's NACA. These guys started Cocaine Anonymous and stuff, and I don't even know if it's still around anymore. But they did it because AA was so in the Hollywood area, you couldn't throw a book without hitting somebody that was famous.
Yeah.
It was just loaded with people that were famous, talented, musical, and needed to get sober and get back to their life. I didn't see that in AA because of the way it was the founders and all that stuff. It was like, you're doing this so that day by day you can be sober, period. And that's supposed to be enough. In the old days, that was enough. These guys had jobs and they were coming home drunk all day and beating their wives and smashing cars. They didn't have much of a life because they were drunk all the time. And so on a daily basis, if you were sober, that was good enough. And that
Yeah.
didn't work, and it doesn't work
Well,
now.
the pain behind the reason to drink or take drugs is not dealt with at all. I mean, it's still better
Yeah.
than them smashing cars and wives, obviously. And it was a more simple time and less knowledge around brains and brain health and cognitive function and executive function, all those things that are altered with alcohol and drugs. So what year is this in Hollywood there where you're in Mar Vista? And then this is kind of like a year or two into your sobriety?
Yeah, a couple of years, probably about 86, 87, maybe
Okay.
something like that. And I'm not entirely sure. I know that I was a lot clearer then and thinking, and I had a job, and I don't think I was in a relationship at that point, but I was really having a good life and
And
making
so
some really good friends.
as those first years go on, now because you that's really all you'd ever known since
Yeah.
you were so young, did you struggle a lot with it? Like, did you create the lifestyle around, I mean, you were still in Hollywood and you talk about all the craziness going on there too, right? In the 80s,
Yeah.
that there's still so many people using and drinking. Did you struggle with that? Or did you find that maybe you already had some kind of divine connection that guided you, or was it challenging?
I would have kids that I would sponsor, and they would be so distraught about, they had a slip, and a lot of people would make them feel really bad, and oh, you fell, and I never did. I never would do that to anybody. I would be like, You're an alcoholic. It makes sense that you would slip. I didn't understand that part of the program that you would tell, oh, you're surprised that I had a drink? I never did. I guess in a lot of sense, I was just done somehow. Bob instilled something in me that has led me through my whole life. I'm not going to hurt me anymore. I did enough of that. And it was a victim to all these people, and sometimes with very good intention. It was difficult, but it's the first time in my life that I had control. And I
Yeah.
didn't really realize it, but it took a while afterwards. But it was the first time that I didn't need somebody to love me anymore.
Because you were loving yourself finally.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful because I think even now, looking at the sobriety movement and how endemic drinking is, it is a radical act of self love. So I stopped drinking, it'll be 4 years in June. And
Oh
drinking
my
was
God.
problematic to me once I decided I was just done. I'd given up drinking before, and it was kind of like wine here and there. My daughter's 11, she just turned 11. Since she was born, my drinking was a lot less problematic. But if we were going out with family and friends, I would still drink much more than I needed to and feel guilty and disgusting the next day. And to pull yourself away from that. So I think even when I try to visualize that environment that you were in then, and having that deep inner feeling of knowing that you're just done. And that's kind of a thread that I've noticed is a lot of people are like, I was just done. And that's how I felt. I was just done. The magnitude of our stories are very different, but that common thread that people get to a point and they're just done. But
Yeah.
that requires such a heavy dose of self-love to extract yourself from situations, to pull yourself out of friend groups that maybe don't serve you anymore. So I feel like even looking at from that perspective, that love for yourself had to be so grand. You being in that role modeling position probably helped as well.
I think you're right. I also think, though, that there's so many things in my life that made an impact. The people in the 60s, probably 66, 67, is when I was doing LSD at that time. And the people I was with were thinkers, they were trying to change the world, and that kind of thing had an effect on me.
Mhm.
I've never really been a person that sits there and thinks about something that has a topic and I go, oh, okay, so let's think about this kind of thing. I respond to stuff, I get drawn into, and I think that a lot of the stuff that went on with me, and I can't compare it to other people because I only have my own experience with this thing, but I sort of think that if anything explains it, it was that I was destined to do this.
Yeah.
If you're ready, then stop fooling around and we're going to go ahead and start giving you this information. I spoke the other day at a psychic fair. One of the things that I said is that being a channel is really like a gift. There's a lot of people out there that channel spirits. There's people that channel Jesus, Ezekiel, Raphael, and all this kind of stuff. They seem to sit there and go, okay, can Raphael come in and talk to me? Like they have some kind of control. I'm not like that at all. I'm completely the opposite. I asked one time, who am I channeling? Janet said, why don't you ask? Apparently, I'm channeling some entity named Steve. It's like, what bullshit? How come I get a Steve? But
You're like,
anyway,
do you have somebody a little bit more well known for me to channel other than just Steve?
Steve, and he laughs at me. It's like, yeah, okay, I get it. But the thing that shows me that I'm sort of chosen in a way is that I have a deep fear of taking credit for what I have.
Yeah,
I have a feeling, and it's sort of like alcohol. I have a feeling that if I said one day, something,
I'm
yeah,
the
I'm the guy and everything, they would cut off the tap.
Well, that's because I think that's actually a deep understanding of it being something much bigger that is flowing through you. That being a conduit is different than being the source. So
Yeah.
I think that's a greater understanding of it, really.
It would be so easy to let your ego go in there and dance on stage and tell everybody I'm a guru or some kind of bullshit like that. But it's not
Yeah.
true. It's really not true because I am 100% sure that left to my own devices, I left school in my sophomore year of high school. I never went back. I read my first book maybe 20 years ago from beginning to end, and I have no idea what it was.
You knew I was getting ready to ask you what that book was.
Yeah. Well, the only books that I was ever, and this is in my book, so here's somebody that can't read, has really never read any books and all that stuff, hasn't studied anything. And so what do? I write a book.
Right. I mean, I feel like that makes sense, right?
Yeah, of course.
Can I ask you a question? Through that many years of sobriety, after that many years of debauchery, your relationship with yourself is going to change from day one to today, being a sponsor to other people. How would you say that your relationship with yourself has changed over these 40 years of sobriety?
I
You've
think
got such a crazy story.
I,
You get
I,
funnier as the
I'm
time goes on?
Yeah, I'm a joy, man. I really am. I have a t-shirt that somebody heard me say this one time, and it's my mantra. She sent me a t-shirt and I love it. It says, it's a saying that I came up with. I have no idea what's going on, but I know I'll be okay.
Yeah.
She said that was just the coolest thing. So that pretty much sums it up. I don't know what the hell's going on. It's all crazy and I'll deal with it. It's fine. And so my relationship, sometimes I keep asking the universe. I had a conversation the other day with Steve. I said, you realize I'm from Camden, New Jersey, right? And I said, this is my solemn promise to you. You gave me all this information, making sure that when I'm on stage, I'm clear, I can channel, you take wonderful care of me, and you help me write the book. And if I don't end up being able to have a major effect on the world before I die, I'm coming after you.
On the other side.
Yeah. I said, me and you are going to duke it out.
But that's the thing, right? I think from that perspective, even though you said that you're not to admit that it's you, you still want to create change. You still want to have an
Or,
impact. If you think about your story, it's so magnificent and how you've stayed this, like, it's quite crazy. Like when you said you were on stage at 9 or 10 years old and you were high, do you mean from the experience or were you already sniffing glue? You
no,
made a reference to that when it started to fall apart, you used glue as an analogy that everything that had held you together over that period of time was starting
yeah.
to come apart. So that's that like
I
comparison of how it started.
when I did legitimate theater and all that kind of stuff, I wasn't getting high back then.
Okay.
When I would come back home, let's say I was doing something in New York, I was completely clear. But when I came back home, in order to gain acceptance, if the guys around me in the neighborhood were sniffing glue, then I sniffed glue. But I wasn't like dependent on it or anything like that. I was just using it.
In the
Each one had,
context.
it was weird. Nobody had any money in Camden. It was a nice neighborhood, but it was also extremely poor. And you're fighting all the time. I lost 7 friends in my sophomore year of high school.
Wow.
Heroin overdoses. One, a friend was hung out in front of the school. And it was a rough area, a lot of fighting and things, but I needed acceptance of some sort. So I would come back. It's like the last thing in the world that I wanted was to drive into Camden in a limo. That would not have flown. Not that that ever happened, but I was in limos in New York and this type of thing, not for me, but for the, maybe a caster or something like that, or being with an agent and that type of stuff. I wasn't that big, but I did a few shows with Carol Burnett. I replaced Jim Croce in a band. I had one band that did a couple warm-up gigs with Miles Davis. So
Yeah.
anything I did, I was right on the edge of something big happening, and it never did. And I think it just kept me
Well,
going until I can do this.
yeah. Well, that's beautiful. And maybe that's the other part is that if something big happened, maybe that would have kept you trapped.
Absolutely.
right? So it's all divine. Now, this far in, do you celebrate landmarks? Do you remember the day that you got sober, or just that you went there for the cookies and the coffee when you didn't have money and you didn't have a home? Do you remember the date?
Yeah. If somebody said, when did you get sober? I have to say June, July, August 28th, because I
Right.
can't remember August. If you came up to me and said, what month did you get sober in? I couldn't go, "Oh, I got sober in August." I have to say June, July,
June, July,
August.
August. So August 28th, each year, do you do anything like, do you mark that for yourself or celebrate in any way, or do you share any insights and
No,
wisdom?
no, I noticed that another year has happened. I noticed
Yeah.
somewhere down the line, something will remind me. If I was in trouble, say if something happened to Janet, I doubt that I would go, "Oh, my honey died. I need a drink." I don't think I would do that. But if
Yeah.
I ever did, I know what to do. I know where to go. And I know that I'm not going to hurt myself. Not going to do it. I may hurt you. I may hurt somebody else, but I ain't going to hurt me. I've done enough of that. So much of what I do here comes from being in the program and listening to those stories, having those memories and things, and really deep love of life. Yeah, I got all that. That's
Well,
cool.
that's amazing. I was going to make a joke that maybe on the 28th of August every year, Steve visits you, brings you a reminder, and that sets you forth on a new journey or something.
Gives
Wow.
me a cake.
Well, Raymond,
Mhm.
that is an exceptional story. And I feel honestly, the more people I speak to, it's just so beautiful how many people are choosing this way of living. And you chose it at a time where I'm thinking it would have been a little bit more challenging too. There's a lot more of an awakening around it now. There's a lot more people waking up to the reality of the science behind it and the physiological implications on your brain, on your body, and all of those pieces. But to do that 40 years ago is amazing. Looking back, do you have, so I've got a question actually from, like you said, a love of life. And this actually ties in quite beautifully because my last guest, he's 5 years sober. I take a question from the previous guest and ask you. So the question that Kaya left for you was, what brings you joy? Like, what really allows you to step in and feel joy in your life here and now?
Being able to share what I have. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And
I
that, well,
I
that's,
I love doing this,
yeah, it's beautiful. It's really
you
amazing.
know. I really do.
How many podcasts? Do you go on a couple a week generally, and then you go to these fairs?
Try. I do anything and everything that gets put in front of me. Since my book came out, I've started to do podcasts on a regular basis. So now about 6 or 7 months, and I've been on about 35 of them.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah.
And we'll
Yeah.
make sure too that we will share that information about your book in the show notes as well. Do you have a question for our next guest?
Oh, okay. A question for the next guest.
And it doesn't have to be sobriety based. It can be any quirky little thing that you want to ask to provoke thought.
Do I have a question for somebody else? Boy, I wish I had thought about that. So Steve is coming in here.
Okay.
What do you want to know? A question. So the person's going to be in sobriety. These kinds of things are very important to me. The thought-provoking question. How would you feel? What is it that's going to make you happy? And what are you willing to do about it?
Beautiful.
Okay?
Also, I think that little bit of silence, we need so much of it. So we don't need to rush everything all the time. I
Mm.
teach yoga and lead breath work. And I really invite people to welcome that little space where there's quiet. When you think about neurologically, your system, how it feels just while we were sitting there in silence together, just existing. It doesn't all have to be rush and race.
To recognize that because of where we're at in the world today, what we need is authenticity. Authenticity connects with us as human beings. Right now, we miss it because so much of everything we do is computer related.
And productivity related. It's a beautiful thing to create and be part of conversations, putting forth value, but
Yeah,
that can't be everything. It can't just be about you providing something. It's almost the same as when you talk about looking for that love at the beginning of your life, seeking love through performance, like quite literally performing for love. If you look at troubled stars like Britney Spears, that is them performing for love. A
sure.
lot of people might not be on an international stage with hundreds of thousands of people watching, but if you are thinking that you having to do something for your love, you have to provide something to receive love. The
Yeah.
production part is hard for people.
And it's actually a lot easier. What I've seen with people that are mega stars, it's so much harder for them because it gets so confusing to have so much attention that is not real. I used to tell people for the longest time, I was the lead singer of this band, and I could get laid 3, 4 times a week by 3 or 4 different types of women. And I thought that they wanted me, and they didn't. They wanted the lead singer of the band.
Well, I
That they
lived
were,
in London for many years, and I remember this is kind of the height of David Beckham. I mean, he's still very famous and very
yeah,
involved in public life. But I remember saying to a friend of mine, can you even imagine what it would be like to not know who actually cares about what you say because you're David Beckham? How would that feel to not know if you've got a sycophant or someone just validating what you're saying because you're David Beckham? How do you know where your value is? Sure, your value's in putting what do they call them, like golden balls or whatever, you know, knowing who he is that way. Sure, you're an amazing footballer. What about the value of your essence of who you are? I think
yeah,
that would be very difficult to not know if people are just going along instead of saying, well, actually, or
yeah,
or being able to have, I mean, he and Victoria have been together forever, and I think he's got a very close relationship with his children, his family, and his parents. I'm sure that within those circles, but I just remember thinking at that time, this is like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that would be so difficult to not
yeah.
know, right? Yes.
It's true.
Well, Raymond, thank you so much for your time. I deeply, deeply appreciate it. And I have so many visions of those, like just your story, being able to see it. So thank you for sharing it.
My pleasure. And you'll put down contact for people if they want to come and see me.
Of
All
your information will be in the show notes, and I will let you know when we drop this podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I hope
right,
that
honey.
lots of people get to listen to this beautiful transformation that you've made over all these years. And here you are, you and
Good.
Steve.
Yeah, you have a great time, and good luck with the podcast. It was nice spending time with you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And you take care.
All right,
Okay.
honey. Bye.